Greetings, friends. Stephen Cook here. We're here to talk about Hosea's Sinai theology, particularly as it zeroes in on his polemic against calf icons, bull worship, practices, rites, imagery, iconography. We're going to start here in the studio, but we'll leave the studio and get out into a virtual reality shortly because I want to take you to an actual bull site, sacred precinct where bulls were used in worship, a large sculpted, crafted bull in Tel Dan. You'll remember that Jeroboam II, before Hosea's time, set up two bull icons, two bull idols in Israel at the two geographical extremes of his country, one down in Bethel and one up in Dan. And interestingly enough, archaeologists just within our own lifetimes have uncovered the cultic site, the high place, the Bama at Dan, where the bull would have been used in worship. Before we get to that, let's just look a little bit at Hosea and hear some of his polemic against bulls based on his Sinai theology. And while we're at it, we're going to make some reference to a story that is set back at Sinai, at the point of the giving of the covenant tablets, the Sinai covenant 10 commandments. Let me read to you a little bit from Hosea chapter 8, starting at the beginning of the chapter. Hosea writes, "Put a trumpet to your lips, sound an alarm, a vulture, one like a vulture." This imagery is known from contemporary Assyrian reliefs where birds of prey accompanied the Assyrians and would swoop down just as the Assyrians would swoop down on their prey. Hosea is worried that the covenant curses of the attack of an enemy like a vulture are coming into play. Why? Because forsaking the covenant, worshiping other gods besides Yahweh, particularly gods in the form of a virile bull. One like an eagle or a vulture enemy comes against Yahweh's bayit, house, or land. The whole land of the Sinai covenant is in danger. Because why? They have transgressed my barit, my covenant. So there it is, right in literal Hebrew. Hosea knows of this covenant, swearing sole allegiance to Yahweh alone. But not only that, they've rebelled against my Torah, the covenant stipulations, the covenant rubrics for obedience. So Hosea knows about the covenant stipulations, he knows about the 10 commandments, and having no other gods in Yahweh's face is right at the top of the list, and that's what they're doing. So just continuing on in this chapter, verse 4, they have set up kings and state system officers, but I didn't have anything to do it. And in the same breath, they've made silver and golden idols for themselves. It's interesting. Both kings and crafted images for Hosea are ways of getting in the way of that direct, numinous experience of God between vassal and suzerain. But verse 5, God has rejected this egel, this young bull, O Samaria. Notice, even though the bulls are in Dan and Bethel, it's the capital city where the kings are. The monarchic system has brought in these idols. I've rejected your bull, O Samaria, saying, my anger burns against them, against those two bulls of Dan and Bethel. And it's interesting, that same language, that same formula, Afi, my anger burns, Hara, against them, Bam or Bahem. That's exactly taken from the story of the golden calf back in the e-source of Exodus. And of course, Hosea and the e-source of the Pentateuch are both strong bearers of Sinai covenant tradition. So we have reference to a golden idol in both the E account of the golden calf at Sinai. We have reference to God's anger burning against them. That same phraseology is used both in Hosea and the e-source about the golden bull episode at Sinai. And then at the end, in verse 6, surely this bull calf of Samaria will be broken into pieces. Again, a pretty clear recollection or echo of the e-story when Moses comes down Mount Sinai, smashes those tablets of the covenant, and grinds the golden bull into pieces and has the people eat it. Now that in and of itself, the people eating the pieces of the calf ground up into very small pieces or powder is very interesting because it recollects the ordeal that's put through people suspected of adultery. In an adulterous suspicion and case, some dirt is ground up and the suspect eats it, and if bad things happen to the body, then the verdict is rendered. Adultery has taken place. That story is kind of awful if read literally, but on a canonical level where there's dialogue between different sections, it makes a lot of sense in explaining in the e-source of the golden calf episode why Moses had the people eat the ground up powder, because there was a suspicion that they had violated the love relationship. They had committed adultery against the Sinai covenant. Of course, the book of Hosea is filled with imagery of sexual infidelity, marriage betrayal, accusing the people of engaging in all sorts of fertility rites that essentially are sex and religion adultery practices. Now, the other thing that's interesting is that in the Exodus Sinai account of the golden calf, the particular wording about the people reveling and throwing a wild party around the calf, in Hebrew this is language of orgy, language of sex and religion, language of orgiastic frenzy in the worship of the calf. So another interesting connection between Hosea and the golden calf episode back in Exodus 32 in the E rendering of that story.
Now, it's time to get ready to get out of the studio in another minute or two and into our virtual adventure at Tel Dan in the northern part of Israel. Tel Dan is a hugely important archaeological site that I first visited in college back in 1983. At that time, I was able to see the famous Canaanite Bronze Age arched gateway at Dan, but the Israelite high place had only had its platform unearthed. This huge altar that you're seeing south of the platform and the priestly chambers to the left have all been unearthed since 1983. Originally, archaeologists thought that the golden calf would have been displayed north of the altar on the platform. But more recently, folks think temple buildings were built on the platform. Perhaps on special occasions, the bull icon was taken out of the temple building and paraded ritually.
I'm standing in the ancient bull site at Tel Dan, a prominent section of the Tel in its northwest corner. There is a beautiful view of snow-capped Mount Hermon here. One of these bulls that Hosea is so angry about was placed right here at Dan, here in this northern worship site. Another one was set up down south in Bethel, the southernmost worship site. You may read an argument that many people in the northern kingdom understood the bull to be simply a stand or a conveyance for God as an unseen deity. Like the cherubim in Jerusalem, the northern bulls were for God to ride on or use as a podium for a throne. Well, this is exactly what Jeroboam I was probably hoping people would think. The problem is that at the same time he was also hoping to appease and compromise with a large Canaanite polytheistic population in the north, a population that had a lot of influence. But by Hosea's time, it was well known in the northern kingdom that Canaanites worshipped bull statues, as the fertility god Baal. God complains about rites of kissing Baal in Jezebel's time in 1 Kings 19:18. Hosea 13:2 speaks of the same kissing rites, but substitutes the term young bull. The NRSV reads, "They keep on sinning and make a cast image for themselves, idols made of silver according to their understanding, all of them the work of artisans. Sacrifice to these," they say. "People are kissing calves." So, for many, many people in the north, the bull was a symbol of fertility, of masculine virility. Its large, thick its roar sounds like thunder, bringing needed rain and fertility, causing agriculture to shoot up from the ground. So this bull worship was just far too laden with this sort of sex and religion symbiosis for Hosea to have any sort of comfort level with it. It certainly was just not anything that his Sinai covenant could easily put up with at all. Well, let's pause for a second and get an isometric view and some aerial views of this site that we're in and give you a sense of how the altar was related to the steps on the platform and the shrine housing the bull, and what some of the roles of the Levites and other priests that Jeroboam installed here would have been like.
Switch to an overhead view and an isometric model of the sanctuary site at Dan. This is the altar as it would have looked. It's not standing anymore. I've supplied a smoking and burning reconstruction for our video. We move up past the altar towards the 60-foot square platform or podium associated with the bull image. To get to the sacred platform, we first have to pass a monumental staircase, 26 feet wide and 10 feet high. One certainly thinks of the Hebrew term bama, or high place, as one climbs these steps. But the platform one reaches may not have been an open-air sanctuary or a place simply to set up a tent-like or tabernacle-like structure. Rather, the priests assigned by Jeroboam would have entered a shrine building, a holy place organized as a broad room, not the long room of Solomon's temple housing menorah, incense stand, showbread table, and so forth. Back behind and north of the broad room were two staircases leading up to a sacred second story, where archaeologists such as Stager and King suppose that the golden calf of Jeroboam I was housed. Off to the west were sacristy chambers, where the priests would eat their sacred meals from the sacrifices slaughtered in the altar court to the south. Here too were found sanctuary shovels and tools for removing soot and ash from the altar and the area, and other sacred altars and implements. All told, these many discoveries made since I was in college, within my lifetime, attest to the background, the religious background within which Hosea protested and prophesied.
Welcome back to the studio. As we set out in the field, scholars sometimes argue that Hosea and his forebears are being too persnickety about the bulls. That after all, sculpted icons were also used in the Jerusalem temple. So why should Hosea and the other Levites be so upset? Well, you've got to remember that there was also a king down in Jerusalem, and Zion theology was fine with that, but Sinai theology looked at things differently. At its purest, Sinai theology did not think that kings, monarchic officers, idols, icons, or any tangible thing that you can grab by the tail and get a comfort level with was any good. These things got in the way of a direct relationship between the vassals and the suzerain. Anything like a bull image that becomes a stand-in for the real divine suzerain will simply get in the way. It will create less of a sense of human frailty before the transcendent. The sort of sense that causes vassals to realize they need to work on justice. They need to work on relying each other for support and covenant fellowship, since they can sense their own mortality and their own lack and their own need. So Hosea's polemic against kings and bull calves was a serious spiritual element of Sinai theology. And I hope that through this little video, you've had a chance to get a little bit more of an understanding about Hosea's polemic and its setting in Israel's real religious history. Thanks for joining me.